Hey, this is CrossFitTracking.com, just here to do a 2-week update for the in-depth comparison of the Polar Vantage V Titan versus the Garmin Fenix 6 Pro Titanium. Just wanted to give a check-in, show some basic things from the phone. So I'll put the watches aside. We saw in the first video just the summary of the details, and just wanted to go through a basic comparison of different stats and features on the phone itself. So when you go into each of the metrics, I'm going to look at it in a few different basic ways. First is the workouts, then the load, then the recovery, looking at sleep, talking a little bit about the heart rate functionality, as well as the watch usefulness. So you go into the main Garmin page and you get the basic summary of stats and details. Whereas with the Polar, you get into the main page, you get same thing, sort of basic stats and details for the activity for the day. I want to look at it specifically with what would affect and how it would benefit a CrossFit workout. So we're going to look at a couple of the workouts here, how they evaluate intensity and how they evaluate a workout load. So the Polar uses something called TREMP, which is just an evaluation of the difficulty of a workout. It's just based on the overall cardiovascular exertion level. So this was a workout that included 3-position clean pull with a power clean and a regular squat clean every 90 seconds in the first portion, and then a series of a multiple of unbroken movements with a 1 minute and a half rest in between and a 4-minute rest in between each primary round. So it gave it a score of 90, which is 5 dots, so it's the most exertion you can get. And on that same workout, if we go into it here, you get a few different pages. So this sort of shows you a comparison of what the differences would look like. So here you can see the same sort of summary, but Garmin does something where they give you the aerobic output as well as the anaerobic output. So it's summarizing how the workout affected different components of your exercise and fitness level. I was using an H10 chest strap. I've been using that for most all of the workouts, just in evaluating the load calculations, not looking at the actual heart rate metrics. So I wanted it to be the same heart rate. The H10 is connected to both devices. Here you can see you get the summary of information. On the Garmin, you have to go to 2 different pages, which seems sort of useless, but Garmin has a good layout of different aspects. So training effect, elevation, those things don't matter as much to a CrossFit workout, but training effect obviously is a primary piece. This gave it a 3, 2.3 on the anaerobic. This gave it a 90, very high on the cardio load. All those things flow into it, but as far as workout goes, the primary difference is Garmin provides anaerobic analysis. Polar provides overall exertion, which is good, but just not as good. If you were to do a run on a Polar, though, you're going to get, on the Vantage V Titan, you're going to get a lot more stats as far as obviously the power output, which is a stat that only Polar offers on their watches without a foot pod. The stats for the Polar are not as well organized. So if you do a run, you get like a series of a multitude of stats all in this same red screen. If you do a run on the Garmin, you would get a series of, pages that is much more useful information. So now looking at the load, if you want to calculate or look at how it affects things, this is just so far in the testing. So this just shows maintaining. You get the VO2 max, which gives you some history, but that's not as pertinent or important. On the load, you get the load focus, obviously, because this is a 6. It's 945, and the 6 series offer the load focus, like specific areas. The 245 just offers the load as a summary total page. And then you can see each exercise, it gets categorized a certain type of benefit. That's called a cardio, that's called a load label, which is specific to the 945 and the 6 series. You can see these things, again, they don't matter to me as much from a CrossFit evaluation standpoint. You do see the load levels, like how much each workout contributed to your tally, your weekly load. And you can see that, my fitness has been going up, so my load levels have been decreasing. in the beginning, as I was getting back into CrossFit or getting back into CrossFit shape, it was giving me a higher score because my heart wasn't used to it, or the watch itself, or the tracking the history, the data itself did not see me working out as consistently, or didn't have it since I started this test on the 6 later as well, didn't have a history. So it was like we went from 0 to a lot. Same thing on the Polar. The Polar calculates your load based on, so let's get back to on an average. So it says here, this is where you get the summary. This is a summary of all your work for the week. And then this is the summary of the same type of screen. So this says overreaching, this says maintaining on the Garmin. You go into the primary screen, you can see how much each workout contributed. The way that they calculate your load over a period of time is through strain and tolerance. The tolerance, which is the light blue column, is an evaluation of your fitness level. The strain is how much that workout put on your body or on your cardiovascular load. So it gives you a score, and they relate to each other to determine if you're overreaching. So if your fitness is high and you've been using it, then your tolerance for a workout is higher, and your strain will come in wherever it's going to come in. Obviously, going from 0 here on the Polar, my tolerance is low. Now, the tolerance is based on a 28-day tracking period of your overall fitness, workouts, and those types of components. The strain is an average of your 7-day total, and these both combined also has a really good data screen when you look at it over a longer period of time. So you can see in the blue that I'm building tolerance. So the tolerance here, it goes static after a period of time, but it shows the building of tolerance in those first few workouts as I'm getting acclimated to the watch and it's getting acclimated to my history. But this, to me, is a much more useful metric for evaluating fitness than this. So this is a simplified score. Again, we don't need the labels. We don't need the load focus type, which again is in the higher level watches on Garmin. Even on the 7-day load, and this is the same type of stat you would see on the 245, you'd see your range for growth and the stats down below, but it's static and it's historic. Whereas on the Polar, you have future prediction of growth, future prediction of tolerance versus a strain for each individual workout. So they both track the load relatively similarly, and just so that you're aware of how Polar calculates whether you're overreaching, you basically take your strain divided by your tolerance, and if it's like at a 1, then you're maintaining, and here I'm in the 2 range, so I've got a tolerance 19, strain of 48, so 2 point something range. And then this week, as my tolerance has gone up, I'm at 21.46, so it's about twice that. So when you look on the watch, you can see that. So you can see on the watch, again, highlight the issue here. You go into the primary page, and I got a 2.1. So my strain, which is my average of my 7 days. So here you can see the strain of this one workout was 46. Well, maybe this light's not good here, but here, my average of the last 7 days, average strain is 44, and my tolerance is built up at 21. So that divided by that shows 2.1, which shows that I'm in the overreaching category. So anyway, back to this. So that's how they calculate the differences. The Garmin had been using for longer, so it has a better awareness of my fitness level. So that's why it's saying each workout, is not killing my body as much as it was in the beginning. Polar uses much more informative graphs and estimates, just a better presentation. So they're different between Polar and Garmin on these features. So next, looking at recovery, both estimate recovery time. It's a little bit quirky, but in the recovery time from just a particular workout, so you can go into that same workout or something yesterday where it thought actually categorized it as a run, unfortunately, in the beginning, even though it wasn't. So you get the score for the level of the load. You can see the workout stats. But the recovery I have had to find on Polar Flow, which makes a little bit no sense. So you'll get your training sessions down here when it populates and links up, and that's a fitness test. But here, so let's go back to that same workout we're looking at. This one said my reasonable 12-hour time frame. Ironically, on the Garmin, you can't, for any workout, you can't see the recovery for that particular workout. So it does estimate it in the watch, and it does track. So one of the things that's beneficial about Garmin's line is that you can put the recovery time on the watch face itself, which has been very useful. But it fills up with each workout and then depletes over time, but you can't see the metric in the app itself, which is a little bit, I guess it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it not as useful to look back on a workout and see how much it pushed up the recovery time. Now, the other part of recovery is long-term recovery, not just how much recovery do you need from a workout, but how much recovery do you need over a longer period of time, or how worn down is your body. So your body battery is the basic test for how your body is holding up to strain over a number of days. But it's still just one metric. This is just a heart rate variability metric, which tracks your level of stress throughout a day. So I can go back to the end of last week when my body battery was peaking at like 65, 70. Here's a poor sleep night, and just I had run myself down. It's what I tend to do over the course of the week. And you can see that it shows what your body battery is at that point in time when you go into a workout or when you go into the rest of the day. So this shows you overall health in that categorization. And when it comes to Polar, they do a much more in-depth. So it doesn't track your strain level over the course of a day, though. So it tracks your recovery at night, but it doesn't look at how you spent your day even outside of the workout the way the Garmin body battery does. So here's the nightly recharge. It takes your sleep as well as an evaluation of your autonomic nervous system charge, and it summarizes it into your nightly recharge. So you can see that over the course of the days. And into last week, I was compromised. So I was just, sleep was below usual. Different times the autonomic nervous system was down. So it just gives you a better gauge going into the day with a more in-depth evaluation of your recovery at night, whereas Garmin just provides a body battery of how you replenished at night based on low stress levels and your heart rate variability coming down significantly, and then how the day depleted that battery. It's still a useful metric. Both are actually useful metric, but right now, the nightly recharge provides a little bit better approach to starting the day. But the one thing, if I was going to compare the two, is that the nightly recharge takes the information from sleep and does something with it. Garmin just provides a static set of information of your sleep that gives you your stats for what you slept and how deep and different periods of time, but it doesn't do anything with it. Same thing with the pulse, and I'll get into that in a second. But Polar gives you this evaluation. So you see the sleep charge, you get a lot of stats. We'll just go through the sleep now. A lot of stats on the sleep. The solidity compared to averages. It always does an average and how the last night was to give you an estimate for the quality of sleep and the impact on your internal, settings. Then the autonomic nervous system is interesting because it takes your heart rate variability, which is similar to the body battery, and it compares it to baseline being 59 beats versus 1,009 milliseconds heart rate variability, and then the breathing rate at the bottom here. So you can see the breathing rate has a purpose now. So on the Garmin, you get your respiration through the night, but what does that mean? What does that help? It doesn't affect any other stat. It doesn't evaluate to anything that would be of service or benefit. But here you can see it evaluated to have a summary for the impact on your physical well-being over the course of the night. One thing that's interesting is that Polar only primarily tracks data in a 4-hour block. I don't know why they don't summarize for the whole period of time, but they basically start an hour after you've fallen asleep, and they track a 4-hour block on both cycles. Sleep gives you, another thing that's interesting is that it gives you a sleep score. So that's how the two are different. Now there's one level of Polar stats that I haven't yet tested, and that's called Recovery Pro, which requires orthostatic tests done on the watch paired to an H10 chest strap over the course of a number of days. So I've used the nightly recharge for a period of days to get a handle on that. And now I'm going to switch to the Recovery Pro. So my final review will have a little bit more of that stuff in it. That track it. Both seem to track the details the same and get the same relative quality, but the sleep is just much more well evaluated on the Polar, in my opinion. You still get stats, and even the pulse ox stat, which is not available in the Polar, on the Garmin, it doesn't translate to anything. To me, this doesn't help me know, well, what does that mean to me internally or to my body. So again, a lot of good stats and well put together on the Garmin. You can even turn those little icons on here. But to me, it doesn't mean anything if it doesn't have a relative value to my overall well-being. So the other thing that's interesting is that Polar will show these things on the watch face itself. So you can see nightly recharge. You can go into that, and it'll show you your sleep score as well as the ANS charge, and you can open either of those details to see all of those same stats down to the detail. On the watch itself, which is beneficial. Even the sleep stat details on the watch itself, Garmin doesn't provide any of these details on the watch. So the other thing that's sort of neat, well, I'll talk about it in a second, but either way, the usefulness of the stats on the Polar is turning out to be better. So as far as a heart rate monitor on the back of the watch, each of them use the different varieties. So Polar uses 9 diodes, smaller, blue, red, green, and red in color. Garmin uses the 2 large green as well as the red for pulse ox. But I tracked it on one workout. They both were similar, but not great when compared to a chest strap. I'll track it more in detail later. I just wanted to get the first sets of workouts on the same heart rate tracking. So looking at the watches themselves and comparing some of those details now, how does it perform as a watch? Well, Garmin is just a ton more customizable. So with Garmin, you can track and do a bunch of different widgets and details. The thing that I'm finding, though, is that I don't use a lot of the widget capabilities. So it doesn't make that much of a difference to me that there's a bunch of widgets behind the scenes of the watch itself. I don't use hydration tracking as much as I thought I would, which is a feature only on Garmin. I don't find using many of the pages on either of the devices. And as far as watch functionality, they both receive notifications. You have to do a hand gesture to get the notification pop up on the Polar, which is sort of annoying because I just want to glance down and see the notification on the watch face itself. But one thing that's interesting or that's useful for the Polar is that you do on a watch face, you can just change the watch face to show a basic stat around the edge of the watch. So here you have the nightly recharge along with the time. Here you have a suggestion for how hard you should go in that workout today. Here you have a generic screen, how much activity level. It's sort of like the data components of the Garmin, which you can customize, which is nice. But again, I just use primary pieces of information, so I might leave it on the overreaching screen or on the nightly recharge screen throughout the day. On the Garmin, you can customize any of the details to show stats and details within the watch face itself. Comparing the two watch screens, the Polar continues to be difficult to read. So the dimness of the display, to me, has been hard functionally using it throughout the day. So you can see a more dim hand gesture, which is somewhat not fully legible even when you have the hand gesture backlight on, and then you push the top backlight to get a full backlight, and it's still not as bright. The blacks and the colors are more washed out, and the Garmin, only on the titanium or the sapphire crystal screen, is super clear, very vivid blacks, very quality transflective. The watch faces available on the Garmin are very useful as well because it's just fun to be able to change the face. Again, I lean towards more of a simple setup, but the Garmin has been useful that way. Battery life on both has been much better on the Polar, but I guesstimate that because of the poor screen brightness, that has to contribute. And it doesn't use music. I've only used music a couple times on the Garmin, but the Garmin, this has been lasting about twice as long than the Garmin. Now I have this set to 80% because again, I want to be able to see the watch face, and that's useful for day-to-day life, but not for battery. Recharge times, the Polar recharges much faster, about 1.5 times faster from my estimates. Vibration is slightly better on the Garmin. You can only have one alarm on the Polar. You can have countless on the Garmin. I do intermittent fasting, so they both have great countdown timers, but the interesting thing about the Polar is that on the main watch screen, which is like the most basic watch screen that's available here, it'll show your countdown left right on the watch screen itself, which is useful for me. As far as the button presses, the buttons are definitely more stiff on the Polar, and there's a high quality button presses on the Garmin as well. Unfortunately, I did have an accidental button press in the middle of a workout that ended the workout on the Garmin, which I hadn't had that before, but definitely not going to happen on the Polar with the stiffness of the buttons. But then again, on the flip side, for day-to-day use, pushing the button, you have to deliberately really press it. The feel on the wrist, both feel the same. The Polar feels a little bit more rigid because of the band design and the connection, but they both feel okay. The weight, I haven't noticed a difference, although when I have the band a little bit looser on the Garmin, I will feel the weight because the watch will flip around a little bit more. And then as far as the looks, now that I've worn them for a couple of weeks, the Polar definitely has got a superior design when looks. I feel like it's the perfect overall design, and I do love the Titan's band, but the buttons, everything about it looks really good. The Garmin is okay. I don't like, those things don't add any value, especially when I'm doing CrossFit workouts. But overall, this is my update when you look at the workout evaluation, the load, the watch functionality, the sleep, and the recovery metrics when comparing the Polar Vantage V Titan, that's the titanium version, with the Garmin Fenix 6 Pro titanium version. I'll continue to give an update at the 4-week point just to give a full and thorough review. This is CrossFitTracking.com. Thanks so much.